current wave of a protest across America sparked by the brutal murder of George Floyd by a white police officer present an existential threat to Israel? A strange question. Yeah, do you want to know the similarities between Israel and the Floyd's killers? Okay, I'm Ola Al-Asi and today I'll answer these two questions in details. Astonishing as it may sound, though, Israelis propagandists and defenders have been shocked to discover suddenly that the parallels between America's structural racism against its black citizens and the colonial settler regime's violent denial of Palestinians' human rights are glaringly real and obvious. Ironically, the shock and awe of being confronted with the reality of widespread systematic discrimination against blacks, which mirrors the immorality of Zionism's inherent racism, has led defenders of Israel slandering the Black Lives Matter movement. The absurdity of trying to defame and discredit protesters as violent looters is utterly disingenuous and displays a naivety which is reflected in the failure of both Trump administration and Israel's right-wing regime to acknowledge that repression and the denial of rights won't be tolerated anymore. Trump's refusal to hold police officers and National Guards accountable for their normalized and almost casual brutality is reminiscent of the last gasps of the white minority rulers in apartheid South Africa.
There won't be defunding, there won't be dismantling of our police. And there's not going to be any disbanding of our police. Our police have been letting us live in peace, and we want to make sure we don't have any bad actors in there.
Ultimately and reluctantly, they had to come to terms with the fact that racism is unjust, immoral, and above all, unsustainable. It is thus quite revealing that defenders of Israel are terrified by the intensity of the protest movement in the US, which has spawned solidarity across Europe and other parts of the world. The protests are gaining momentum. Pro-Israel lobbyists refer disparagingly to the legitimate demands made by the protesters for equality and justice as mayhem. This is intended to conceal the fact that resistance to oppression, whether by blacks in America or by Palestinians against Israel's brutal occupation, is entirely legitimate and justified. Incredibly, but not surprisingly, as Israelis propagandists describe Black Lives Matter as a radical group and anti-Semitic, such allegations are designed to discredit the legitimate protest movement, the actions of which have clearly shaken Trump and his buddy Benjamin Netanyahu, but which have inspired others around the world. Israel relies on discrediting and slandering critics of its apartheid policies, but despite Trump's shoddy response, it cannot be denied that the world recoiled in horror when the graphic video of George Floyd's neck pinned to the ground by the knee of a killer in police uniform went viral. Such a brutality by a law enforcement officer would not have surprised many Israelis, or indeed Palestinians. It is, after all, part of the course in the occupied Palestinian territories. Hence, the solidarity expressed on protest banners for Palestinian victims of Israeli knees on their necks and the brutal killings, aided and abetted by US support for the Zionist state, was to be expected. Likewise, the Palestinians are backing a Black Lives Matter. Such solidarity fueled the anti-apartheid movement against white minority rule in South Africa, as indeed it will spread support for the boycott, divestment, and sanction campaign against apartheid Israel. It was always inevitable that the protest movement in America and the rest of the world would find common ground with Palestinian demands for justice. On the 30th of May, Iyad Halak, 32-year-old Palestinian with severe autism, was chased by Israeli border police forces into a nook in Jerusalem's Old City and fatally shot as he cowered next to the garbage bin after apparently being mistaken for an attacker. The shooting has drawn comparisons to the death of George Floyd in the US and prompted a series of small demonstrations against police violence towards Palestinians. The calls for justice have crossed Jewish Arab lines. You can find lots of photos of Israelis when they were brave enough to take photographs with their knees on the necks of Palestinians. This is another subject which has virtually been downgraded compared to even 5 or 6 years ago, because people have got frightened about this campaign, which alleges everyone is anti-Semitic, except those who support Israel. The Trump administration's gifts to Israel of billions of dollars, military aid, and bogus legitimacy for its Jewish settlements, occupation, and annexation of Palestine are now imperiled. This is why Israel in particular is on the edge following George Floyd's killing by an American police officer. That's enough for today. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and share the video. See you.